Hi, this is Lori Nicholson. I have just recovered from presumptive COVID-19. Presumptive meaning I was never tested for COVID-19. I live in Maryland. All across the country, actually, testing kits are very limited, and here in my state, tests are pretty much reserved for frontline medical personnel with direct patient contact. So mine is presumptive, but my doctor, the health department, and I all are fairly convinced that I had COVID-19. And I want to share with you what I did and what helped me through this very challenging illness. I am not a medical provider of any kind. I am sharing as a good Samaritan, as a private individual. I will be hosting these videos on my business website or on my business YouTube channel, and I will be hosting the accompanying PowerPoint slides on my business website. However, this has nothing to do with my business. I am just using those as places to host this information. This is part of my world service, and I want to share with others what helped me get through. So if you have COVID-19 or if a loved one of yours does, here are some things that helped me. This is not going to be highly produced. I just want to get the information out there. I'm going to be doing several different videos on what helped me clinically, what helped me holistically, and what helped me energetically from an energy healing perspective. This particular video is about what helped me clinically. So what happened for me is I started feeling symptoms on a Saturday. And I'd actually just gone for a 5K run, and then I had gone hiking with my husband and my daughter. And I just started really falling behind on the hike and feeling really run down and terrible. And for the next 3 or 4 days, I felt pretty bad. I felt like I had kind of either a really bad cold or a mild flu. And I was pretty much in bed, and I was self-isolating, which I'll talk about later. But I didn't feel awful. It felt like a pretty standard virus to me. And I was getting through it. And that lasted for about 4 days. 3 or 4 days. And then I had 2 days where I felt maybe 90% well. I felt a lot better. Like, okay, I'm kicking this thing. This is great. And then I had a day where I felt fantastic. I woke up feeling energized, feeling enthusiastic, feeling healthy, and I thought, great, whatever this was, whether it was COVID-19 or not, I dealt with it. My body handled it. I'm all good. And I was told by my doctor and health department that I could come out of isolation the next day. And I was very thrilled about that because it was my eldest daughter's birthday, and I was really looking forward to celebrating with her. Well, the next morning I woke up and I had nosedived. I felt absolutely awful. I had fever, dry cough. I had the fever and dry cough, the low-grade fever and dry cough, the previous week as well, but now the fever was a little higher, the dry cough was much worse. I had a red, sore, angry throat. I had stomach churning, and it didn't even hurt, but it just churned and churned and churned like 24 hours a day, like a rock tumbler. I had achiness and exhaustion. I had intense pressure on my chest and a lot of difficulty breathing. In fact, one of the most terrifying things about this illness, and I will describe it as pretty terrifying, is that it's really hard to breathe. And fortunately, I had a pulse oximeter to be able to check my oxygenation levels, which they dropped at one point before getting on medication, but they were actually not terrible, which was very reassuring. So that's one of my suggestions that I'll get to. Being able to check how much oxygen you're getting is very calming when it feels so hard to breathe. So I just felt really terrible. And the weird thing about this illness is with most illnesses, you get sick, you have a fever. As soon as the fever breaks, you're on the road to health. You're starting to get better. With this, I'd get a fever and then it would break. And then I'd get a fever and it would break. And then I'd get another fever and it would break. And it just went on and on and on in what felt like an endless cycle. For a week and a half, I think that went on. And I'd get fevers a couple times a day and they'd come and go. Well, that second Saturday when I woke up, the beginning of my second week, when I had that nosedive, I not only had those symptoms, but I started getting really, really, really weird other symptoms that I'd never had before with any other illness. And they included my left eyelid would just twitch. It twitched and twitched and twitched for probably 2 days straight. And then it went away. It included, at one point, the 4 fingers of my right hand, my dominant hand. They started tingling, and then I completely lost sensation in them, and I completely lost movement. I could see them, I could lift them and flop them down, but I could not move them myself. There was like a nerve component of this virus, whatever this was, it was really impacting my body in strange ways. By the time my doctor called me back, and she got back to me very quickly, she and I must have had 4 or 5 telemedicine visits during the 3 days that were really challenging, the 3 days at the beginning of the second week for me. Lots of emails back and forth. And she got back to me pretty quickly. Luckily, by the time she got back to me, I had sensation back in my right hand. I could feel it. I could move it. All was well again. I had one time I fell asleep, and when I awoke, my neck felt so swollen and angry and hot and sore that I couldn't move it. It felt rigid and stuck in place. And I had some weird thoughts like, am I having meningitis or something? I've never had that, and what is going on? And this is the strangest thing I've ever experienced. And it was pretty scary because I couldn't move my neck and I couldn't breathe very well. Again, my doctor called me back within the hour after getting off of another phone call, a telemedicine visit with another patient. And by then, the neck soreness was gone and I could move my neck again. Can't explain it. It's really strange. It's pretty terrifying though. In fact, one of the most challenging things about this virus is that you have to do everything by yourself. It's really strange. It's scary things like not being able to move your neck, not being able to breathe, having all this pressure on your chest, and nobody can help you. Nobody can come close to you. I set up my nightstand next to my bed as almost a medicine cabinet. And yet, even so, in the middle of the night, for the 3 days that I was really struggling to breathe, I would get up in the middle of the night and I would have this terrible fever, and I would have aches and fevers and chills, and I'd have to drag myself out of bed and go take my temperature and take my pulse ox and get my medicine and get all of this stuff for myself. And I realized when my doctor was checking in with me that I had to keep track of all of that because I wasn't keeping track of it. And it just felt like one long period of time that I was having challenges. The days just ran into each other, and I got a legal notepad and I started taking notes about, at this time I took my pulse ox and that it was this percentage. At this time I took my temperature and it was this number. At this time I took these medicines in these amounts, and I basically started keeping my own charts, which is a hard thing to do when you're feeling so bad, and it's also really, really important. So there's definitely a mental and emotional component of having to do all of that yourself when so many things feel challenging. And this virus really can feed on fear and terror, because the more fearful I would feel, the more scared I would feel about, boy, this is really weird. I'm losing the ability to use my dominant hand. I can't turn my neck. I can't breathe well. The harder it would become to do those things because of the fight or flight. I was getting into the sympathetic part of my nervous system and starting to really panic. And I realized the way through was to stay in the parasympathetic, calming relaxation response and keep myself really, really calm, really, really focused, really, really grounded, so that I could get deep breaths. And that was really hard. For 3 days, I basically meditated my way through about 48 hours, the first 48 hours of that second week. After I nosedived, it was breath by breath, and now I'm taking another deep breath. And even though it feels hard to expand my lungs, and it feels like there's a hitch that makes it hard to get past, to completely inhale, I have to push past it. Okay, good. I got a good deep breath. Now I can exhale. And because I was able to take a really deep breath, I must be okay. Now I'm going to focus on taking the next deep breath. I literally did that pretty much nonstop for 2 days. I know I dozed on and off, but it was a pretty concerted effort of I am going to remain calm, I am going to focus, I'm going to get into this meditative space where I can take deep breaths and keep myself out of the hospital. During those 3 days, I had many talks with my doctor about, do I go to the ER for breathing support? Do I stay home? Which one do I do? And because there were people who were even more sick than I was at the hospital, and because I could have gotten other people sick by leaving my house, and because it felt really challenging and difficult to leave my house, and I could tell from the pulse oximeter I was still getting a decent amount of oxygen, I decided to handle my symptoms at home. All the weird symptoms were coming and going, and fortunately they were going after they came. So I stayed home, and I decided if it got worse, I could always go to the hospital. So what did my doctor do? At this point, the doctor put me on some nice medicine that really helped me. In fact, let me just talk about first things first. If you feel you're sick, even if you're not sure if it's cold or the flu, if you feel you're sick, it's probably good in this day and age right now with what's going on with COVID-19 to self-isolate. That's what I was told by my doctor and by the health department. It wasn't clear that I had COVID-19 that first week. In fact, I thought I probably didn't have it that first week, but it turns out I probably did. And I self-isolated. And what that meant is that my husband moved out of our bedroom and moved down the hall into our guest room. We're very fortunate to have the space to do that. I then stayed exclusively in my bedroom and my bathroom. And that worked because we have the space. And what my husband would do is he would bring me trays of food and leave them outside my door. He'd knock on the door or call to me, and then he'd leave and call to me when he was far enough away from the door that I could go open the door, so that we maintained proper social distancing. And then I'd bring the tray into my room and I'd eat, and then I'd put it back outside, and I'd either call to him, or if I didn't have the energy to do that, I'd text him and say, the tray's outside my room, and he'd come pick it up. Likewise, he got a nice large pitcher for me and just filled it with water. And he'd leave it outside my door. I'd bring it in. I'd drink tons of water. You want to do that all the time with any virus, but with this virus especially, you really want to flush it out of your system. It's incredibly uncomfortable virus, or it can be. I realize some people are fairly asymptomatic or completely asymptomatic. And then he'd just refill my pitcher as needed. So we would stay apart. Once a day, my husband and kids would get down at the other end of the hallway from my room, and I'd go to my door, open the door, and we'd talk from an appropriate distance away so that they were safe and I could get caught up with their day and I could see them and their smiling faces. And then often at night, my husband and I would talk by phone, even though we were only down the hall from each other, but I could have a little bit more of an open conversation with him, things I didn't want to share with the kids. I didn't want to scare them. And we kept in touch that way. And we did that for, I'm going to say 10 days, 11 days maybe. I was in isolation for 17 days. So yeah, the first week was not as bad though. It wasn't as scary. Anyway, here's what helped me clinically. Lots and lots of water. As I said, you really want to flush out your system. In addition to that, I was drinking warm water with lemon on a regular basis. We had some organic lemon juice in the house, and my neighbor was nice enough to go get us some additional when I needed it, just from the local natural food store. And we would warm up water, big mug of water, and put enough lemon juice in it that it would get cloudy, so it was very tart. And I would gargle with that, and I would drink that a lot. It helped ease my sore, red, angry throat, because it almost felt like I had strep throat. So that helped, and I would also sometimes gargle with hot water with salt. I also rested a lot, which is also very normal to do during a virus or an illness. However, what's really important with this particular virus is I couldn't rest in the same position. If I just laid on my back, I would start feeling so much pressure and pain across the shoulder blades of my back if I were just laying there, and I couldn't breathe very well. It would make it very, very challenging to get a deep breath. And so I would roll onto my left side, and I'd roll onto my right side, and then I'd lie down on my back again. And then I'd turn over, roll over onto my chest and my belly so that I could breathe deeply into the back of my lungs. It was challenging. I would sometimes get up and walk around. I couldn't walk very far because I was stuck in 2 rooms, but I would walk around the rooms just to get some movement and force myself to breathe even more deeply. So that was very helpful. As I said, my cousin, a former ICU nurse, had placed a pulse oximeter on hold for me at our local pharmacy, and my husband picked it up for me when he got my prescriptions. And that was super, super helpful because I was able to test my oxygen levels when I was breathing, so that I knew even when I was really struggling to breathe, I was still getting enough oxygen, which was reassuring. I could tell my brain and my body, it's okay, you're getting enough oxygen. I know it feels really hard to breathe. Keep breathing, you're getting enough oxygen. So that was really, really helpful. I also used a heating pad on my back, on the back of my lungs, across my upper back. I'd use it across my chest. I'd use it on my left shoulder and underneath my left armpit and against the left side of my breast. That was super, super helpful to make everything feel and stay more liquid in my lungs. My doctor prescribed an albuterol inhaler for me, which is a total lifesaver. I mean, seriously, that did wonders for me and helped get my pulse ox back up. She also prescribed for me amoxicillin because my throat was so angry and red and sore, difficult to swallow. It really felt like I had strep throat, even though we don't think I did. But she gave me amoxicillin. I know a lot of people with COVID-19 are being put on a Z-Pack, both antibiotics. So I took the amoxicillin. For 10 days, I took the albuterol every 4 to 6 hours for however many days I needed it. I also, during the most challenging, the 3 to 4 days of the beginning of the second week that were really, really challenging for me, I took Mucinex. I took a 12-hour formulation, and so I took it twice a day, once in the morning, once right before bed. And I took it only as needed during those particular days when I was starting to feel like it was really hard to breathe and I was really kind of struggling with the feeling of congestion. Likewise, those couple of days that were really challenging, I also took some extra strength Tylenol. My fevers were creeping up at that time, and they never got super high for me. I've heard people getting to like 103, 105. Mine didn't get that high, but low grade, 100, 101 fevers, and it was starting to creep up, and I had pounding headaches those days, so I did take 1 dose of extra strength Tylenol for each of those 2 or maybe 3 days. I'd have to look back at my notes, but only as needed. I'd rather that my fever burn the virus out of me, and so I tried not to take it unless it was absolutely necessary. The doctors had already warned to stay away from Motrin and Advil and things like that, so I took the extra strength Tylenol instead. And those things really, really helped me. And I've listed them in a PowerPoint slide that I will host on my website. The video will go on YouTube, and I hope that this can help those of you struggling with this right now, or if you have loved ones struggling with this, that it will help get you through what helped me clinically. I'll be posting some additional videos as well as about what helped me in other ways. In the meantime, I hope everybody stays healthy and well and keep that social distance. It's really important because you don't know who has it and who doesn't, and they don't necessarily know either. And this is a miserable illness. So stay healthy, stay well.